Welcome to the Wellness Rebel Show, where you reclaim your health and tap into your body's healing power. I'm your host, Fatima, here to empower you with the knowledge and tools to take charge of your well-being. Whether you want to boost energy, improve mindset, or unlock vitality, this is your go-to source for practical advice and inspiration. It's time to step into your power and live a life of health and freedom. Welcome to the revolution. Welcome back to the Wellness Rebel Show. Today, I have Dr. Ryan Monahan. He's the founder of Peaceful Mountain Medicine, where they blend functional and Eastern medicine. Welcome, Dr. Ryan.
Thank you. So happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're very excited to have you on. So before we, deep dive into things, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and why you decided to go this route?
Well, I was kind of forced into it with my own health issues. Around 2007, 2008, I started having a lot of chronic health issues. And I was seeing my conventional doctor to get help with those things. And the things they were recommending weren't helping. They were actually making me worse. A lot of antibiotics, a lot of proton pump inhibitors. So I was having a lot of digestive issues, but then also like recurring lung infections and everything they were doing for me, I was just getting sicker and sicker, and I realized this wasn't a good path to continue on. Simultaneously, I was recommended to see a couple different people by some friends. One was an acupuncturist and the other was a functional medicine doctor. And between those two, I found rapid improvements in my health in the next 6 months after implementing everything they both told me to do. And that kind of blew me away. I was like, wow, I've been struggling for so long. And I went to my doctor and they couldn't help me, but these people could. What's going on here? Why is this working? Why is what they're doing not working? And I started reading more books about Eastern medicine and taking some classes at a local school that had some open enrollment classes and learning more on my own. And it just became something I was fascinated by. And I really thought this was important and more important than what I was doing at the time. I had kind of a corporate job and it wasn't really my purpose or passion. It was just something to pay the bills. And this was something I was really passionate about. So it took me a while to come to the decision, but I quit my job and went back to school to learn, Eastern and functional medicine. And I just felt like that was a better contribution to the world for what it did for me. I wanted to be able to do that for others in the future.
Wow, that's definitely a beautiful journey. Like when you find something that works for you and then it becomes kind of like your passion and your purpose. And finding that passion is definitely life-changing. I believe. So,
It
what?
was literally life changing. I mean, first my symptoms getting better so I could actually, be a healthy human who could function at a reasonably high level. And then, yeah, just shifting my whole perspective on really the world, because when you start to learn about holistic approaches to medicine, it goes much deeper than just the body. It looks at your connection to nature and the world as a whole, and you start to look at everything through different filters and lenses. And yeah, it changes the way you see things. It really you have to like empty your cup to learn
Right.
these new ways, right? And that can be hard for some people. It can take time to kind of unlearn what you've been programmed with or conditioned with growing up. And yeah, just start from scratch and see the world in a different way. That can be disorienting and destabilizing and in good ways, but yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I can see that. So let's start off first with, because I know, you work a lot with a lot of women who might have like hormone imbalances and whatnot. And I know most of us, including me, we were prescribed birth control and we took it for years without really knowing the consequences and what it does to our body. So, can you tell us about why we should avoid birth control? And can you also share natural alternatives?
Yeah. So birth control is kind of a common band-aid that is given to patients, and they're kind of told it will balance their hormones. And that's not really what's taking place. It's more of a suppression than a balancing. And if you're suppressing symptoms, you're kind of muffling the message your body is trying to send you that something's wrong. So symptoms to me are just messengers. And so it's like, don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah.
Greet the messenger and hear everything it has to say, and then usually work with somebody who has, a good skill set in determining what those messages mean. And so for me, I like run functional lab work and dig deep into the patient's, medical history and try to figure out why they're having those symptoms. So getting put on birth control, there's just so many reasons that women are put on birth control these days besides not getting pregnant. And you just have to look at the individual, right? So are you being put on birth control for skin issues, for instance? Like, let's look at your detoxification pathways in your gut and see if there's issues there and actually fix the root problem rather than drugging you and suppressing symptoms, which will eventually come up later as new symptoms, either a year, 5 or 10 years later, because there's an underlying imbalance that's not being fixed, right? So you're kind of like whack-a-mole. You're like squashing one thing with a drug, but then it'll pop up someplace else with a new symptom, whether it's right away or down the road. So, there are so many side effects to birth control that are published in peer-reviewed literature. You can research them. I did. I've got a whole breakdown on my website. You can read about it. But there's a long list of side effects these come with, and people may not realize that. So they get put on birth control, and then all of a sudden they have anxiety issues or hair loss or headaches or mood disorders, fatigue, weight gain, bloating, all those digestive symptoms, thyroid issues, hormone and other hormone issues come up. There's so many things. The list goes on, but it's not a cure-all by any means, and it's really just a short-term fix to whatever you're using it for that will eventually result in some kind of new side effect or clinical presentation down the road. So natural alternatives to birth control. The things that I recommend, the first one is natural cycles. Okay. They're really great. They use a thermometer, although now you can just use an Oura ring, which is so cool. You don't even have to take your temperature every morning. It used to be, and it still can be if you don't want to do an Oura ring. You use their basal thermometer that measures your temperature, I think, to the 10th degree or 10th or 100th, but it's a more accurate thermometer, and you take your temperature every morning, and after 3 months it's pretty well calculated to figure out when you're able to get pregnant and when you're not able to get pregnant, and usually I think within like a 5-day window. So if you're using that, whether with the Oura ring or the thermometer, and you do that for a few months, you'll know pretty much with a 96% accuracy, I believe, maybe the 5 days of the month that you should either abstain from sex or use another form of, birth control protection that is safe to prevent pregnancy. And then those other days of the month, you're pretty safe to not get pregnant. And then the second recommendation I make, that some people really like it, that I've recommended, some people don't, but it's using neem oil. And there's some good studies that show the efficacy of injecting 2 milliliters of organic cold press 100% neem oil intravaginally with a vaginal applicator 5 minutes before sex. And it acts as basically a natural spermicide to prevent pregnancy. And it's also about 96% effective. So if you want to be super, super safe, do both. Do the Natural Cycles app and the neem oil. And then you virtually can't get pregnant if you're doing both of those things correctly. And they're both completely safe, non-toxic. There's no drugs involved. In fact, neem oil is balancing to the vaginal microbiome and pH. It's actually very healthy for the vaginal space. It's preventative of STDs, yeast, UTIs. So it's a really helpful thing. It's not only going to help you not get pregnant, it's going to help the whole vaginal microbiome be healthier.
That's a double whammy. Sounds like a good thing to use. Yeah, I was actually kind of thinking.
Even if,
Go ahead.
Even if you're not using it to prevent pregnancy, you can use it. Like I'll give it to patients for other vaginal imbalances, yeast infections, UTIs, things like that. So you can use it for other things as well. It just happens to also be a natural spermicide if you use it 5 minutes before sex.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because I'm pregnant with my 5th, and
I was trying to track my cycles, but it was just like, it was like 5 months after, like after my postpartum period came back, and it's like a pre-cum baby. But I told my husband, I'm like, this needs to be our last kid. Like, we need to figure out something that will, prevent another pregnancy. I'm sorry, my kids. But yeah, we're gonna definitely look into that. Now,
It works if you do it right. So
yeah,
give it a try, because 5's a lot. Good for you.
yeah. Even if, like you said, even if it's not to prevent pregnancy, because I know that, the ejaculation can cause imbalances in the vaginal pH sometimes, right?
That's true. Yeah. Sometimes the guy is contributing to the woman's, yeast infection or
Yeah.
UTIs, things like that. So, and there's various reasons for that. But if you want to be proactive, using neem oil before sex would be very supportive.
Yeah. So let's go into copper IUDs. A lot of women think that because it's sold to them as non-hormonal, that it's better for them. But what are like the not implicate, like what does a copper IUD do inside a woman's body that can still affect, their hormones or their health? Like, what's the problems with wearing a copper IUD thinking it's a safer alternative?
Yeah. So they're kind of billed as non hormonal. And I guess compared to the other IUDs that are releasing hormones directly, they are relatively non hormonal comparatively. But they're still a plastic device that's endocrine disrupting, wrapped with copper coil. So I think some people haven't even realized what it looks like. If you can Google image the copper IUD, you'll see that it's actually a T-shaped piece of plastic. So you're putting a piece of plastic into a very delicate region, your reproductive organ area. And the part that's preventing pregnancy are like copper ions being kind of released into the area that disrupt that mechanism and help prevent pregnancy. But now you've got a plastic device that can be endocrine disrupting in that space. And then the copper ions do also create an inflammatory response in the lining of the uterus and inhibit the binding sites of hormones like progesterone and estrogen. So it is impacting hormones, right? Like it wouldn't really be working if it wasn't in some way or another. So it's not just this like, mother nature derived thing where like, the copper IUDs grew on the copper IUD tree and we just plucked them and started using them. It's still this like synthetic plastic man-made device that is pretty brutally inserted into a very delicate area, and sometimes upon removal there can be damage to the uterus or the vaginal canal, and that's pretty harmful in and of itself. Sometimes it spontaneously ejects itself because your body's very smart and knows there shouldn't be a plastic device in that area, right? So it's not as safe as I think some people are led to believe. So is it less hormonal than a true hormonal IUD? Yeah, probably, but it's still not either. So it's like maybe somewhat a lesser of two evils, but it's still an evil, in my opinion, when you have these other safe natural alternatives that I just mentioned, Natural Cycles app and neem oil, that are completely healthy with no negative side effects or drawbacks at all and no risk at all, and still very, very effective at preventing pregnancy. So yeah, it's not ideal. I would definitely look into the Natural Cycles app. At least it's got something like a 96% effectiveness, which is pretty good. And if you combine that with the neem oil, which is also about 96% effective, you kind of can't go wrong.
Yeah. So how do women detox from birth control and the IUDs?
Well, that's a good question. I get asked that a lot about things. How do you detox from like a vaccine, or how do you detox from this, that, or the other? it's a full system approach, and at least what I do. So you have many different detox pathways in the body. You've got your liver, which most people are very familiar with, your kidneys, your lymphatics. Your gut is actually a major detox pathway that I don't think people think of as a detox pathway, but it is. Every time you have a bowel movement, you're clearing a large amount of debris and, toxins and, whatever your body's trying to get rid of. That's an ideal pathway. So if you want to detox anything, you support those pathways as much as you can and you optimize them so they're really doing a great job, right? We always start with the gut and functional medicine for a lot of reasons. The gut is where you get your nutrients from. It builds hormones and neurotransmitters. It even builds some vitamins itself. And then it also is a major detox pathway. So if you want to get a lot of things working really fast, you optimize the gut. So if we're going to detox somebody from anything, including like birth control or copper IUD or anything, we would work on the gut substantially. The liver and the gut are very much connected in that the liver dumps a lot of things into the gallbladder, like through bile, and then that dumps into the small intestine and clears through bowel movements. So if you're detoxing through the liver, that's ultimately going out through the digestive or the gut as well through bowel movements. So other things to support the liver, things like B vitamins, amino acids, antioxidants, minerals. So a lot of nutrients, right? And a lot of people don't really realize that the way phase 1, phase 2 liver detoxification works is through nutrients, transforming toxins from fat soluble to water soluble so you can clear them. So giving a lot of nutrients, like I just listed, the B vitamins, the amino acids, glutathione, magnesium, other things to help the liver do its job. I give those through supplements or food recommendations, recommendations based on lab work to see where people are deficient. Same thing, supporting the kidney with herbs and nutrients, supporting the immune system. So it's really just giving the body extra support to do extra detox. And I'd say in this day and age, detox is paramount. We're just exposed to so much more than we've ever been exposed to in all of human history. And our bodies can't keep up. We're just overloaded. And you need way more support to clear everything. So that's kind of at the core of what I'm doing with patients, is running labs to see where they have deficiencies, imbalances, overgrowths, whatever it may be, and then balancing all of those systems so they work better. And you'll be clearing things like birth control, but you'll also be clearing the thousands and thousands of other things that we're exposed to on a daily basis.
Yeah. And speaking of us being so overloaded, what are some common sources of these toxic exposures that we are, we get bombarded with on the daily?
Well, women, it's a lot of like personal care items and cosmetics. I think women are putting on something like 112 or 116, unique chemicals every day by choice, straight onto the skin, which absorbs into the bloodstream and in the body. So that's like a low-hanging fruit to eliminate, either using apps or websites that help you find non-toxic alternatives like environmental working groups. Skin Deep, I think it's called. And then there are a couple other ones, like Think Dirty app is a good one. And so you can find, if you still want to use those products, you can find low tox or non-tox alternatives. So that's a good place to start because you're totally in control of that. You're buying the thing and you're putting it on you, right? So you're controlling that. Things, in the home as well, cleaning products, what you use to clean your laundry. Those are other sources of exposure where you can find non-tox versions, and those are things you have control over. So you should make those changes. The food supply is another place you have some control over. Obviously, picking organic, which has less exposure to pesticides and herbicides and chemicals, due to wind and drift and all that. Some organic food is found to have some levels, but it's far less than the conventional crops that are sprayed directly with massive amounts of glyphosate and other herbicides and pesticides. So again, choosing like really healthy, well-sourced, clean food, farmers market, wherever you can get organic food, that's another thing you can control. And then your water as well, drinking, I drink like spring water. That's really the best water in my view. Tap water, you could go on environmental working groups, tap water database and search your zip code to see the dozens of chemicals that are in your tap water at hundreds and hundreds of times higher than they should be. And they're all associated with cancer. And short of cancer, they're associated with, lesser conditions and diseases. So clearing out, the chemicals from your water, from your food. These are things you can control, because there's a lot we can't control ultimately, right? There's exposures in the air, there's exposures from like EMF and radiations. There's exposures in building materials in your home.
Yeah.
Mold is a whole nother topic we could talk about.
Yeah.
So, we're just bombarded, plastics, right? That's another thing you can control. Don't buy plastic things, especially for your food. Don't store your food in plastics. Don't consume things out of plastic. Use glass, stainless steel, things like that. So you just be thinking about everything you're touching and consuming, like how toxic is this thing, and is there a better option?
Great tips right there. So, since you mentioned mold, why don't we talk a little bit about mold and how it affects, like human health and even hormones, and maybe some ways to lower your exposure to mold if you can't move out of your house.
Yeah, mold is a big deal in my life. That's actually what got me sick in the first place. So I'm especially attuned to it. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, more people will be kind of waking up to toxic mold and mycotoxins and how dangerous they are, and how many people are actually chronically sick from it. Because 50 to 70% of buildings in the US are estimated to have water damage by the EPA. And once there's water damage to building materials, it only takes 24 to 48 hours for mold to grow. So that's a lot of mold exposure. And it's fair to say not everyone is as sensitive to toxic mold as others. Some people are hypersensitive and become extremely ill. And some people, it's not that big of a deal. So that's where a lot of confusion comes in, because some people be like, well, I live in this house that has mold and I'm fine, but my partner or my child is extremely ill. It can't be the mold because I'm fine and they're not. Well, it can be. There's a genetic component, as there is with everything. The same way some people get wrecked after a night of drinking a little bit of alcohol, and other people can be, alcoholics and function perfectly fine. Like we all have different thresholds and genetic propensity to detox certain things, and some are better at that one thing and worse at another thing. Some people can have an espresso at 11 p.m. and it puts them to sleep. Other people can't have a cup of coffee past 10 a.m. or they're wired and tired all day and night. So you can't just say because one person tolerates something or doesn't tolerate something, the other person has to be the same. So with mold, there are hypersensitive individuals, and mold in the home is very common. The best way to investigate that is to have a professional mold inspector come and do their evaluation. They'll use moisture meters, infrared meters, their visual inspection. They'll take air samples, swab samples. They'll do a lot of things to determine if there's mold. Now, they're not perfect. Often they can miss things. So sometimes you have to get multiple inspections if you're not getting better. And then remediation is a whole other thing. If they find mold, you have to have remediation done. And that's bringing in professional remediation team. And that's a whole thing. They do the hazmat suits and masks, and they quarantine everything off because it's a biohazard and it's very dangerous to be exposed to that. So they'll clean it up and clear it out, and you get retesting done after that. And if everything was done correctly, you now are living in a safe space. And that's not to say you'll never be exposed to mold again. You could go to your grocery store or movie theater or your friend's house or your office and there's mold, right? So you have to control what you can control again, and you can control your home space more than a lot of other spaces. And so what I do in my practice, I run a urine sample test called a mycotoxin panel, and it checks the urine for these things called mycotoxins, which are produced by toxic mold. And if we find high levels of that, we'll take the patient through a detox program with things like binders and antioxidants and antifungals.
What's your favorite binder for mold? Is there a specific one?
Yeah, so certain molds respond better, certain mycotoxins, I should say, respond better to some types of binders than others. Like ochratoxin A is really well suited for activated charcoal, for instance, and some other might be well suited for chlorella or zeolite clays or humic acid or silica, right? So there are different ways to think about it. And that's all on the natural side. And then on the drug side, there's things like cholestyramine and Welchol, which are commonly used binders that are drugs. So you have to figure out what approach you want to take. If you want to take the drug approach or the natural approach, I always do the natural approach. And so I use blended binders to cover all bases, because usually people have multiple mycotoxins at once. It's not typical that it's just one the whole way through treatment. Usually, even if it starts with just one, you treat and other things suddenly come to the surface as you're treating. So using a blended binder is usually a good approach. And then maybe giving extra of something if they're particularly stuck with one type of mycotoxin. So like I'll use like Quicksilver's Universal Binder, but there are a lot of other ones out there, and they have similar ingredient profiles. Yeah, and then you asked before about how these impact hormones specifically. Like some molds and mycotoxins suppress testosterone, some increase estrogen. So if you have somebody with like estrogen dominance, you could be from mold and mycotoxins. Could be many things, but that could be one thing. And if I've worked with some male patients that have really suppressed testosterone levels, and sometimes it's turned out to be mold and mycotoxins that's causing that. So it's like, the conventional approach would be just to have them slap some testosterone cream on their skin every day. Meanwhile, the inside of their body is being destroyed by mold and mycotoxins. But hey, at least we got the testosterone levels for the right number on the paper. So it's like getting to the root rather than just, painting over the problem, which is literally what some landlords do with mold. Yeah. So if you pull the thorn out of the lion's foot, if you take the mold and mycotoxins out of that patient's body, and their testosterone levels go from totally low and suppressed just to normal, because you got rid of the thing causing the suppression in the first place.
Yeah, I know. It's so easy for some to just, like, oh, I'm estrogen dominant, and they're like, use some wild yam cream. Like, how about let's find out why you're estrogen dominant first, right?
Yeah, look at their gut, right? Check their estrobolome, see how they're clearing excess estrogens. That's one way to do it. So I don't mind using things to help change symptoms or lab results in the short term, as long as you're also doing the background work to clear the root issue for the long term as well. That's usually what I do in my practice, is like, okay, let's give you some things to make you feel better, start shifting things as quickly as we can in a natural, safe way. And then let's also do like the long-term work to fix the foundation and the framework of your health and your body. So you're headed down a new path, change your destiny, send you towards a healthy life rather than a chronically ill life.
Yeah, 100%. Because, I agree with you. Like making them feel better quickly so that they actually kind of like feel motivated to go, go deeper. It's kind of like with the adaptogens, right? Because sometimes I feel like people will just stop there, and then essentially it's just still like a band-aid, right? Like, oh, I'm using ashwagandha to help me manage my stress or something like that. And then, but they're not really still digging deeper. And then they're just going to be relying on that maybe their whole lives, maybe.
Absolutely. And so like ashwagandha is like a natural adaptogenic herb that's great, and I use it all the time. But like to your point, sometimes people in the natural, holistic space of medicine, whether it's like a naturopath or functional medicine or whatever like that, sometimes they're still using the natural compounds in like a band-aid type of way, right? They're not looking at the root issue and addressing that. So I don't mind using those things, like I said, to get the patient, like you just said, motivated, feeling a little better. Because some patients come in and they're like exhausted and broken down and depleted, and they don't have it in them to make these huge life changes and work really hard because they've been struggling for years already. So I try my best to start patients off in their treatment plans with some quick wins that help them feel better, at least a little bit, give them some hope right out the gate, like get their adrenals up and running a bit, give them some energy.
Sorry. I'm going to have to do our part 2 real quick. My phone fell down. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah, I think some practitioners, even in the natural space, whether it be like a naturopathic doctor or a functional medicine doctor, can sometimes use natural, safe compounds, herbs, nutrients in kind of a band-aid type of way. And that's not the ultimate goal. You want to really address the root issue or issues as well. And so if you're using some things to make people feel better in the short term, that's great. It gives them motivation, hope, and they start feeling better. They have more capacity to do more about, more of the program you're asking them to fulfill. But you want to be working long term as well, at least I do, to address the root issues in a really like substantial kind of permanent way, so they can move forward without the need to just take like an ashwagandha every day. And that's not to say that's a problem. There are a lot of nutrients and herbs that people would only benefit from taking every day, and that could be one for a lot of people. There's a lot of things I'll take. I take ginseng every day, no matter what. Like, I'm not trying to get off my ginseng routine. I think it's amazing. It's wonderful. But yeah, always be considering both the root and the branch.
Yeah. So do you typically work with your clients? Do you always encourage them or like be upfront with them, like, oh, I need you to work with me for a certain amount of time? Or are you fine with them just like doing one appointment and then they're done? Like, how does it look like working with you?
It will depend on what we're working on. Some people come in with really kind of simple, straightforward things. Like, I have been perfectly healthy for years, no problems at all. I went to Mexico, I drank the water, or I got food poisoning, and I've had, chronic diarrhea since or something. And then we run a stool test, and like, sure enough, there's an infection of some kind. And we give them like a 60-day gut balancing protocol, and they're all better. And then they move on back to being a healthy, normal person. So that's kind of just a straightforward, quick little thing, really. Because I work with a lot of chronically ill patients who have been sick for years, if not decades. And that's a whole journey. I mean, if you've been sick for 10 or 20 years, it's probably going to take a couple years to fix that. There's no like overnight thing for that kind of chronic duration of illness. So it depends on the person ultimately, but overall I usually start people off with like 6-month programs, just on average. And so we'll have our initial consultation, we'll discuss their symptoms. They fill out a lot of medical history forms, like very in-depth forms, so I can understand everything that's happened to them throughout their whole life. We discuss their case. I decipher what labs would be best to investigate further. I order the labs, they complete the labs, and then we have a follow-up appointment. And I take them through their lab results at a great depth in a report of findings that I write. It's usually like a 20 to 25-page summary of their results. And then I have a treatment plan for them that we put them on. That's going to be supplemental protocols and diet and lifestyle changes. And then they're on that for usually about 6 months before we reassess how they're doing. And along the way, we do check-ins. So like maybe month 1, month 3, month 6, we'll check in with the patient and see how they're progressing. We can check in more than that if they want, but we'd like to have at least some built-in milestones to make sure they're headed in the right direction. So yeah, it just depends on who we're working with, what we're working on. But on average, that's kind of what the path looks like for most people.
I love that. It's very personalized and individualized, because that's how it should be.
Yeah. I mean, because that's the funny thing is like people will come in for the same symptom, say anxiety, because that's really common, but like there are hundreds of things that cause anxiety. So if you have anxiety because you have certain nutrient deficiencies, that's one thing. If you have anxiety because you have gut imbalances, that's another thing. If you have anxiety because you have toxic heavy metal issues, that's another thing. If you have anxiety because you have mold issues, that's another thing. That could go on and on, right? So like people coming in with one symptom could all have different underlying causes. So you have to investigate at the individual level. The conventional approach is just like, oh, anxiety, here's the drug we use for that. Have a nice day, right? So this is really individualized in discovering specifically why do you have the thing you have, and then fixing that thing in a very specific way. And once that has been resolved, usually the symptom is resolved as well.
Yeah. I want to touch on real quick on, the chronic underlying hidden infections. Do you see a lot of that in your practice?
Every day. Yeah. I was just having a conversation about this with a patient yesterday. The difference between the way in functional medicine we look at what you just described, like chronic hidden stealth infections, versus the conventional view of like an infection, which is this very acute emergency thing that is very extreme and you might be hospitalized for and maybe die from, right? So that's like an acute care infection. That is very important to take care of in an emergency type of way if you have that. But there's a space between perfect health and those extreme infections where there's these chronic low-grade inflammatory stealth hidden infections like you just alluded to. And those cause just lingering problems where you just don't feel well for a long time because that infection's there. It could be H. pylori, it could be any number of bacterial infections or parasites or candida, yeast, fungus. All of that is occupying your immune system. It's trying to fight it off. It's causing inflammation. It's draining you. It's taking your life force and your energy and your resources. And if you clear that infection, your body doesn't have to deal with it anymore. All the systems can go back to doing what they do best and focusing on other things rather than, being occupied by this stealth infection that's been there for maybe years for a lot of people. H. pylori is a common one, like a stomach infection. So yeah, I test for a lot of those. They're very common ones. And then there's more advanced testing I'll run on some patients that it seems prudent to do so. Cyrix has some pathogen testing that I like to look at. That's even more advanced than the stuff that I use with my basic workups. But it's like it can make such a huge difference in a patient's well-being if you can identify like a stealth hidden infection and clear it. That alone can just be it. That can be the thing that caused their chronic health issues for so long. And you get rid of it and they're all better and it's gone. Not to say you couldn't get infected someday in the future through, foodborne pathogen or something like that. But yeah, that's really important. Don't overlook that. And I run multiple labs to look for those with every patient I work with.
So how does that happen though? Like, is it just because the body has been kind of compromised and weak, and then all of a sudden you have these infections and you don't know about it because it doesn't like manifest into full blown symptoms? Is that what happens?
Yeah, that's pretty much correct. So depends on the infection. Like H. pylori I mentioned a second ago, you can transfer that through sharing a drink or kissing, right? And so often we'll test a patient if they have H. pylori. We may test and treat their partner as well, whoever they're kissing. Because if you clear it in the patient, but say their husband, I'm doing this with a patient right now, I just emailed her today about her husband, setting up a test for him. He's not a patient of mine, but we need to test him for H. pylori to make sure he's not giving it right back to her.
Yeah.
After we clear it from her. So yeah, that's a unique type of pathogen that is really easily transferable. And then other ones, yeah, they're like foodborne pathogens. You travel somewhere to a foreign country, or it doesn't even have to be that. You could go to a restaurant and something's undercooked or poorly handled, and you get some, pathogenic infection. But to your point, why maybe is it happening in the first place? Often there's imbalances present that weaken the body's defense mechanisms, whether your microbiome is imbalanced due to like antibiotic use, then you're just vulnerable because you've killed off all the healthy bacteria like that are there to protect you against that, right? And so people with a lot of antibiotic use may be more prone to these infections. Anyone with a compromised or weakened immune system, which unfortunately is a lot of people, is more prone to this. Their body just can't fight off the infection. If you have poor digestion, low stomach acid, things like that, the stomach acid's there when you eat food to kill off a lot of these pathogens before they reach your intestine. And a lot of people actually have low stomach acid, and it gets past the stomach at that point into the intestine and sets up shop as an infection. So I could keep going. There's a lot of other reasons. Mold on the topic is really suppressive to the immune system and dysregulating to gut function. So if you have mold or mycotoxin issues, you're almost assured to have these types of infections in the gut. Yeah, so it's a lot of stuff. This is a really comprehensive approach. We look at many, many, many things. We kind of leave no stone unturned within reason, because that's the way the body is. It's not so simple. Most people want it to be this A plus B equals C type of thing, and it's not. It's like a constellation of things. Everything's connected. There's maybe not it's maybe not as linear as if you want it to be.
Yeah, yeah. It's like looking at those, boards that has like y under x times z.
Exactly.
It's very
You have to
complicated.
just getting more data. I mean, that's the difference is like
Yeah.
the functional tests I run, because a lot of people ask me, can I just use my lab work I got with my conventional doctor? I'm like, what did that accomplish? They
Yeah,
probably told
yeah.
you it looked normal. I don't have like a special lens to look at their lab work and say, look, they missed all these things. They're running really basic labs for extreme disease. And most
Mhm.
people are suffering in this day and age from chronic issues that aren't extreme disease yet. And it's not the right lab work to find the answer to the problem. So we run, whereas a conventional blood panel might be 20 or 30 markers, what I start patients with is like 1,000 markers. So you just
Wow.
have more data to sift through. And when you have more data to work with, you find more answers.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely. It's really like digging a hole, and you just have to keep digging deeper to find the real root.
There's a
But
lot
yeah.
of digging and many holes are dug, and we
Yeah.
look all over the landscape, and but you just have to find enough stuff and fix enough of it to shift the body back towards homeostasis. And once you kind of give it that very strong nudge and help it up a bit, it can kind of take it from there.
Yeah.
Once you get it headed in the right direction, your body takes over and can really do a lot of the finishing touches.
Right. Yeah. Our bodies are very, very intelligent, and it knows. It knows what to do as long as you're giving it the right things to function at 100% or even more. Is that
Putting
even
putting
possible?
the
Even more.
Well, putting the body in position to heal is really like something I'll say a lot. And what does that mean? It's like in my approach, it's clearing out toxins
Yeah.
and pathogens and overgrowths, clearing out all the bad stuff, and then giving your body all the stuff it doesn't have enough of, the good stuff
Yep.
like vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, rest, water, light exposure,
Yeah.
peace, solitude, calm, all these things that we're just lacking now more than ever. So yeah, to put it really simply, we're just getting rid of all the bad stuff as much as we can and giving you all the good stuff that helps your body recover.
Yeah. Now, speaking of light exposure, let's talk about that because we know that they've demonized the sun, right? And a lot of people are so scared of being out in the sun and slathering themselves with chemical sunscreens, thinking it's good for them. So let's touch on that. Like, why is sunlight or even like the proper light exposure very important and great for our bodies?
Well, the light regulates our circadian rhythm and our sleep wake cycle. So following that in a natural way, sunrise, daytime, sunset, and avoiding or strongly limiting exposure to blue light screens, phones, computers, tablets, etc., televisions in the evening when it's dark. That's just a really, again, low hanging, simple way to help regulate your circadian rhythm, which then influences hormonal balance throughout the body. It's really messengers, light is a messenger communicating to your body what it should be doing at that time. Should cortisol be elevated or should cortisol be low? Should melatonin be elevated? Should melatonin be low? Should we be in a rest and digest state and repairing our body? Should we be very active and engaged right now? So like so much is influenced by that. And we're just distorting that natural rhythm by, for many people, being inside all day on maybe on a computer,
Mm-hmm.
certainly not really exposed to very much natural light for most people, and then continuing probably to be inside at night staring at these screens that emit blue light that dysregulate our body's sense of time and think that it's like noon when it's 9
Yeah.
p.m. And so that leads to sleep disruption. And one of the best ways to heal your body is to get an amazing night's sleep. Go to bed early, 9, 10 p.m. maybe if you can. That'd be great. And sleep really deeply for 8 hours, right? That's your body's detox time and repair
Yeah.
time. That's like transformative if you can do that on a nightly basis. And very few people are getting high quality sleep on a nightly basis. So you're kind of robbing yourself of your body's internal healing capacity. So yeah, exposing yourself to light matters for your health, and not to mention vitamin D, right? 90% of the vitamin D we get for our body comes from light exposure. Very large amount of people are deficient in vitamin D. You can see different statistics in different places, but it's probably around 60 to 65% of people are deficient in vitamin D. And in my practice, 100% of people are deficient in vitamin D, because I test every patient for vitamin D. And the conventional standard for vitamin D is basically above 20, but the functional standard, or at least my standard, is 60 to 100. So to be optimized in your vitamin D. And if you have optimized vitamin D, suddenly your immune system's really well activated. And then if your immune system's running very well, a lot of things get better too. So yeah, light exposure for vitamin D, circadian rhythm, sleep-wake cycle, it makes you feel good. Most people are very happy when they've had some sun exposure. That's a positive sign that it's a good thing for you. And then yeah, with sunscreen, there are a lot of chemicals in sunscreen that are not known to be safe. And there are some that even have cancer-causing effects. And that's available on government websites. You can look it up and determine if you think that's a risk that is something of concern to you. And then also checking out the Environmental Working Group's Skin Deep website. They have a whole thing on what are safe sunscreens, what are unsafe sunscreens, what they recommend, what they don't recommend. And so you can decide for yourself what level of, safety you want. But if you're staying out of the sun and putting on sunscreen that has cancer-causing chemicals, and you're staying out of the sun not to get like skin cancer, for instance, you're increasing the likelihood of more lethal cancers that are prevented by things like a solid vitamin D level. And then putting on a compound that has, depending on the ingredients, some association with cancers. So you have to think very carefully. Now, nobody should burn. Burning is never a good thing. You shouldn't go in the sun and burn. That's a bad thing, always bad for everybody. But there are ways to be exposed to the sun in a safe way. And there have been there's a lot of fear mongering about any light exposure is bad for you. And that is evolutionarily a little out there to make that claim.
Yeah. What do you think about those the Spurdy lamps? They might not be as effective as the sun, but let's say it's wintertime and you have a shorter amount of daylight. Are those pretty effective at giving you what you need?
I think so. I've recommended those to some patients that live in, more northern hemispheres with less light exposure, that have seasonal issues with depression and things like that. And I think they're helpful. Yeah, if you don't have the option, I think it's better than nothing. If you don't have the option to get out into the sun for whatever reason, you're at a northern exposure, or you don't have time, or it's too cold, whatever the reason, I think those are good options to consider. Light lamps of some kind.
Yeah. How about red light? That's not going to give you your vitamin D.
No, there's actual vitamin D lamps.
The vitamin D lamp.
And then there are lamps you can use to literally get vitamin D. So especially patients who have low vitamin D, I give a vitamin D supplement to almost every patient I work with. I just think everybody needs it, really. But then you can also do a vitamin D lamp. That's another option. So it's a lamp that you can turn on, and it sends light to your body that produces vitamin D on your skin. And then there's just regular light lamps for like that light exposure thing that helps with seasonal depression. And it's not giving you vitamin D, it's giving you a sense of like the sun. I feel happy again. So and then the red light therapy, that's a whole separate category of therapy, but that's not giving you vitamin D, certainly. And that benefits like your mitochondrial function and many other things. And I recommend that for a lot of patients based on, what I see in their labs. But that won't give you vitamin D.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I'm going to pedal back a little. I'm like, do I have a hall pass? Because since I'm pregnant, then I have to wake up in the middle of the night to pee. Is that a hall pass?
For sleep?
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, when you're pregnant, a lot of things are running a little differently, and you've spent a lot of time being pregnant if you have 5 children. So it's just a part of nature, right? Yeah, pregnancy is going to cause a lot of changes in your body, obviously, and waking up to pee. That's also not if it's excessive,
Yeah, yeah. It's not.
But waking up to pee once a night isn't like a crazy thing. It's better if you don't, so maybe think about how
Mm.
much fluid you're drinking, in the 2 to 3 hours before sleep.
Yeah.
And there are other things that will cause patients to wake up in the middle of the night to urinate frequently, and that's like a sign that something is amiss, and we
Yeah.
can identify maybe what that is. It could be various things, but yeah, just waking up to pee once a night if you're pregnant, not too much to worry about.
I'm just gonna have to wear some adult diapers. Just kidding.
No, I don't know if you'd want to do that either. Might not be a comfortable sleep afterward.
Yeah. All right. We're gonna be done soon. What are your favorite easy tools for nervous system regulation? Do you have any that you love and recommend?
That is the $1 million question. I really think the more I do this work, it's all about nervous system regulation in this day and age, because we're all really stressed out, whether you
Yeah.
realize it or not. There's,
Yeah.
there's the perceived stress, and there's the like actual stress, and there's unperceived stress. There's just a lot. So like being stuck in your car in traffic and everyone's honking their horn, it's a very obvious form of stress. But then
Yep.
there's like existential stress about like the fate of the world, and worry and overthinking. And then there's internal oxidative stress like inflammation and pathogens and infections and deficiencies and all these things that are causing literal stress in your body. And that's actually kind of easier to fix through like lab work and some of the treatments I do. So you can lower your overall stress burden almost in an easier way with that stuff than the nervous system regulation stuff, because you have to become kind of an artist, I think,
Yeah.
of managing your nervous system. And you have to build in boundaries and time and space and practices, and you have to commit to those. Some people just have naturally more regulated nervous systems than others. And there's probably a study you could run there somehow to see who has chronic health conditions, who has, dysregulated nervous systems, and who don't have chronic health conditions, and who have, very regulated nervous systems. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff people know already, but the trick is doing it. And people just like, it just is in one ear out the other when you start saying things like daily meditation, breath
Yeah.
work, time spent in nature, Tai Chi, Qigong, EFT, tapping, creating boundaries. And boundaries are hard because that usually means eliminating people or things in your life that you haven't yet, because you have some commitment to them or it that are causing you a lot of stress. Leaving a job that you think you can't leave, even though it's killing you. Leaving a relationship that you think you can't leave, even though it's killing you. Acupuncture is really amazing for so many things, probably just because it's calming, settling the nervous system, shifting it out of sympathetic into parasympathetic, moving you out of fight, flight into rest, digest, repair. So, I mean, that's probably the magic of acupuncture, is it's just, you lay on a table, you have needles
Yeah.
stuck in you, and those needles activate your parasympathetic nervous system, and just you feel better. So I give like a 23-page handout to every patient I work with that is filled with nervous system regulation techniques and courses and videos and practices and books and like all these things, right? So you can do it in a lot of different ways, but the trick is finding the way that you, well, first of all, feel an effect from, and second of all, can continue with.
Yeah.
There's no like pill you just take and then you have a regulated nervous system. I mean, adaptogenics can help, but like you have to do that work, and it's
Yeah.
internal, it's spiritual, emotional, it's psychological, and it's really hard. and it's usually like a lifelong practice, because you'll have stretches where things are good and stretches where things are bad, and you'll always make excuses not to do the thing, whatever it is, and you have to stay committed to it. So yeah, lots of things out there to consider. DNRS, Dynamic Neural Retraining System, is a retraining the brain program that addresses that. Other things like Primal Trust and the Gupta program. So those are like neuroplasticity programs that you can sign up for and learn basically nervous system regulation to some extent. practices and techniques. So those are a few things to consider. But yeah, start doing work in that direction, research, and find things that sound compelling to you. Try them. If they work, stick with them. If they don't, keep looking for something else. But yeah, if you want to be healthy for the future, for the rest of your life, try to regulate your nervous system and decrease your stress, and you won't have a lot of the problems that you think are from something else. It's probably from those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that no, I agree with acupuncture too. Every time I go to acupuncture, I'm like, it's the best hour of my life because it's like the best nap I get being away from the kids and no one, but yeah, it always puts me in a very deep sleep and it's amazing. That I know that it works, right? It's one of my favorite
right?
things
And
to
so
do.
some people, me too. I love acupuncture at a deep level I can't even describe, because it's so profound and beautiful and magical and simple and elegant. It's using your body's own healing mechanisms to get the result, right? And I think that's amazing. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
It wouldn't still be here if it wasn't helpful. So it's not for everybody though. I've worked with patients with acupuncture who it just wasn't doing it for them, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be the thing that works for you, but find the thing that works for you, whatever it is. For many people, acupuncture is great, like for the reasons you said. It's this time to yourself. It's very peaceful. The setting is always hopefully very peaceful and calming. Lay down, you have like an hour of rest, and then that rest is deepened because the needles shift you physiologically, whether you like it or not, out of your stress state into a relaxed state. And it's very blissful. But you have to do it, again, consistently, right? It's not like 1 or 2 sessions and you're fixed for life. It's like probably every week or every other week if you really want the benefit.
Yeah, for sure. There's never a quick fix, one time thing. But it's a beautiful thing to add into your like routine. I feel like if a person can do it and has the time, to do it, it's a great thing to add on. So before every time I close the show, I always ask my guests of a favorite mantra or like golden nugget that they can share for anyone who's, either struggling or starting their healing journey or are in the thick of it, and just to keep them inspired and motivated.
That's a good question. I don't have a quick answer that's springing to mind. I would say in the approach I take, what is springing to mind is patience in the process, because at least in my experience, if you've had chronic illness for some period of time, it's going to take time to shift out of that, and it can feel defeating and hopeless. And you have to keep pursuing health and don't give up, and find the people who are supportive and get rid of the people who are dragging you down and making it harder, and do a lot of research, try different things. I've tried so many healing modalities. It's crazy. If I put the list together, I just have tried so many things, because it's not that one thing is bad and the other thing is good. It's that some things work better for others. And, you have to find the thing that works for you, no matter what that is. And so I would say, yeah, just keep going, persevere, don't give up hope, and keep trying different approaches and try not to feel defeated, because the healing journey is really, for those who have had chronic issues, it's really a journey, and there's not really a finish line, honestly.
Yeah.
It's more about just getting to a place that is really sustainable and strong, but you're going to have bumps in the road again. There's no moment where anyone's cured in life and just is set for that's it. I'll never have a problem again. So yeah, I guess just patience with the process and the journey.
I love that. All right. Where can the listeners find you, or how can they reach out to you if they want to work with you?
Best place to start would be my website, peacefulmountainmedicine.com. And then I also am on Instagram at Dr. Ryan Monahan. So it's at dr.ryan.monahan. Those are kind of the two places that people could reach out to me.
All right. And everything's going to be in the show notes. And if you're still here, thank you for listening and stay rebellious. Thank you, Dr. Ryan.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It was really nice to chat with you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please click the subscribe button, share it with others, post about it in social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me or suggest topics, you can follow me on Instagram at Fatima Pagtakan or at The Wellness Rebel Show. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.